the recnet you know and love, J-pop star of Maryland, Mishi Bradley.
I was not expecting that kind of an introduction. Are we all awake?
Yes,
we are.
More coffee.
Oh, more caffeine, yeah. Get me another Diet Coke, please.
What do you want? I'll get it.
No, I don't want anything. I've already drank too much today, and it's what, 9:35 or whatever. So, sorry for the late start. I just talking too much about things that are very important to me, and what is important to me is policy, both LPFM. Policy, NCE, full power policy, even I have a place in my heart for the rural mom and pop class C and D AM stations. So I mean, there's a little bit of love for everybody, and so that's what I just wanted to do with this presentation is just give everybody an update of where we are on a few issues that may or may not impact you, but there are a few things at the FCC that are going on right now, and some people are saying, why can't we have another LPFM filing window right now? Why can't we? Well, unfortunately, we have to wait our turn. There's a lot of things right now on the FCC's list, a lot, and of course they're understaffed, so they can only handle so much at a time. But I wanted to touch on a few things here that we're going to talk about here. AM revitalization, TV repacking, the proposed full power FMC4, which is going to impact a lot of things if it happens. We're going to talk briefly about the aftermath of the 2013 LPFM window. What can we do if we get another LPFM window sometime in our lifetime? What can we do to improve the qualifications and such, and any of the rules that just didn't work in 2013. And we'll talk about some of the stuff that's already in the pot right now that's brewing for possible changes to the LPFM service. Some of them are most likely not going to happen. Some of them I don't want to see happen. So let's talk first about AM revitalization, because this has got a pretty big impact right now, especially on the LPFMs. Not as much on the below 92s as it does on the LPFMs, but overall the FCC is proposing some numerous changes to the AM rules. Probably one of the more controversial ones is eliminating the nighttime skywave protections for the big clear channel 50,000 watt AM stations, which means that a lot of these stations that you hear at night, they get certain protections by AM stations, and so by some of these rural AM stations, they're required to shut down or go to a directional pattern or reduce power and stuff like that. And they're wanting to make it so these stations could stay on the air. Despite the interference coming in from these Class A AM stations. But that's part of it. But the big part that really impacts us has to do with the ability for AM stations to obtain a translator, an FM translator in the FM band, and place it, to rebroadcast their AM station over FM. And in 2016, and still going on till the end of this month, there is an opportunity right now for AM stations to go out and find a translator that's already been authorized within 250 miles of their AM station, and be able to move that translator up to 250 miles to get into their area to provide, provide AM service over the FM station, over an FM translator. We first had a window for Class C and Ds. They were given a head start. They were given a 6-month head start, and then the Bs and the As came in. I'm not sure. Do you know the count right now? I think we had about 800 or 900 AM stations already.
I don't know the count. I can tell you that I had a few
Lions who did it, and it really helped the mom and pops, but obviously removed spectrum.
Yeah, it did. It did help the mom and pops, and yeah, it did. It has it has reduced spectrum in some places. But the bottom line is that there's a limit of one. They can only take one station. They can only get one translator, and any of the moves that take place this year, they have to, they're committed to rebroadcasting the AM station for a minimum of 4 years. So this is to prevent somebody from, a speculator from getting an AM, getting a translator, moving it 250 miles into a metro area, and then turning it around and flipping it to somebody else. They wouldn't be able to do that. 2017, we're hoping. I want to get this. I want to get this window done. There's going to be another window. And this time it's going to be for new translators, new drop-in translators, not the 250-mile move, but for new FM translators for AM stations. The dates have yet to be announced. We're still waiting for the report and order for AM revitalization, the first MO&O on that. Like with 2016 Class C and D FM, Class C and D AM stations, which are the smaller ones, like the daytimers and the graveyard channel 1230, 1240 stations, they will have the priority. They'll have the priority again. They'll have a head start. They will be limited to one translator in this window. However, if an AM station participated in 2016 in that window, they will not be able to participate in 2017. So, think about your area that you're in, and think about the AM stations that are in your area, and look at them and see how many of them have already taken translators in the 2016 window. FCCdata.org can give you that information, and that can give you an idea of what's left over and whether there might be more translators coming your way in 2017. Those translators are going to be permanently attached to those AM stations as far as the license is concerned. They won't be able to break off the translator and sell it to like EMF or Edgewater Broadcasting or any of the mega ministries that kind of eat these that kind of take on these these FM translators. So that's actually the one good part about it. Also, another thing is on this 2017 opportunity, I have filed a petition for reconsideration on a portion of this, claiming that by limiting the FM translators, new licenses for the FM translators to AM stations only, it may have violated a portion of the Local Community Radio Act that basically states that new LPFM licenses and new translator licenses must be distributed based on community need. And there was community need for LPFM translators expressed during the proceeding. It was Prometheus did that. So we can thank Prometheus for doing that. And so that's the argument that I'm making. So what I'm asking for is, in the second of the two windows in 2017, I'm asking for an opportunity for LPFM stations that want to pick up a translator to be able to apply for one in the second window. Give them an opportunity. To me, they are just as important, if not more important, than the rural C's and D's that are being given a head start. But at the same time, I don't want to prejudice the C's and D's. And so putting them in the second window would not prejudice any of what's already been approved.
How do you think that might play out?
Long shot.
Yeah.
Very long shot.
Yeah.
Long shot.
But you're brave for doing it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's one of the reasons we like you so much.
Well, somebody's got to.
That very stuff.
Somebody's got to speak up on this, and Yeah. Right now, I am. It's sad to say, especially with Prometheus, unfortunately, going to their current status of being all volunteer, no paid staff, no more policy staff. I'm pretty much left right now with the majority of the policy work for LPFM. I'm out here alone, and I'm doing the best I can. I've only got so much bandwidth, and so much funding. So hint, hint.
Quick question.
Yes.
Yesterday, I think you said something about it was absolutely never okay to rebroadcast a commercial on an LP, a commercial.
A full power FM station on an
Yeah.
on an LP.
How does that work with what you were just talking about?
That's not the situation.
Not at all, because we're talking low power.
We're talking translators right now. We're talking FM translators.
Sorry.
This is not yeah.
Challenge. Thank you.
That's okay. That's okay. That's why you're here. You're here to learn. And no question is stupid. And no question is out of order except what I had for dinner last night. It's this brick oven pizza or whatever the place was called up the road here, the Brick Inn.
Focus.
They had pretty good pizza. Okay. Shameless plug. Anyway, just this is just a quick look at how the AM station. Because one of the concerns that we have was these AM stations are getting these FM translators, putting these big 250 watt translators with this huge coverage. And how do they do it? And what are the rules about it? And what's going to possibly change next year? Right now, right now we've for FM stations. If FM stations want to run a fill-in translator for their okay, let me I'm going to skip that because that's going to be a little confusing. But right now the service contour, is the protected contour for a translator for AM must stay within what's called their 2 millivolt daytime contour, and that's basically that's basically their equivalent of like their protected service contour. It's their service area. What's being proposed for next year is that they're going to possibly be able to go past their 2 millivolt contour and go out to 25 miles and possibly even further. So this will definitely extend the area where these translators would be able to be placed, which of course means that it's a bigger area that could more areas that could possibly be impacted by these towards LPFM stations. So this is just some of the stuff we have to look at. How do translators protect LPFMs? Well, they use different rules than we do. In our world, in LPFM, we use distance separation for everything. You got to be so many kilometers away from this class of station, etc. Now, translators have a little more flexibility. Every state, the stations have what's called an interfering contour. That's the field strength potential of out to 50% of the receivers, 10% of the time. That's basically the area that a station has a potential of reaching out to. And that's the area that the FCC considers as the area that that a station could possibly interfere in. The protected contour is what we're all used to, the 60 dB, which is just your service contour, which for an LPFM is on average 5.6 kilometers, 3.5 miles out. Translators are required to protect LPFM stations by assuring that their interfering contour does not overlap the protected contour of the LPFM, and translators, unlike LPFM, translators can use directional antennas to achieve this. So yeah, they do have an advantage. And also too, another important thing to remember, translators are not required to protect an LPFM station's second adjacent channel, where we have to. That is, that's one of the conflicts in the rules right now. Now, what we had happen in Los Angeles. Now, how many are you familiar with the Los Angeles mess that took place, the MX-27? Well, we finally got that squared away, and we had several stations that were able to be placed 24 kilometers apart, and so we got that squared away. During this window, we got ourselves a little surprise. We had one station out in Pacific Palisades, one station in downtown Los Angeles. An AM station decided to drop a translator in the Baldwin Hills just over Inglewood and basically splice their way between 2 of our LPFM stations on 101.5. But this is what I'm talking about, where you have the green contours are the protected contours of the LPFM stations, and the red contour is the interfering contour of the translator that's being proposed, that's already been granted. But as you can see, they're using a directional antenna. So as you can see, they were able to squeeze that in there, just right in there, and just get in right between our two stations. And of course that could cause some interference to some of the LPFM stations. It can definitely impact their ability outside of their service of their protected contours. So again, the issue with the translators potentially interfering with LPFMs is real. I mean, it can happen.
The LPFMs have to protect translators, but translators don't have to protect the LPFMs. Therefore, can't these translators start doing, what happens if there is interference? Let's say the station goes on the air, this translator goes on the air, and causes significant interference with both your LPFM apps.
Talk about that in just a minute. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Now, LPFM, this is just a slide I talked about just a little bit earlier. How LPFM stations are required to protect translators. Their translators are classified in 3 different potential subclasses based on the size of the service contour of the translator. Does not take into consideration directional antennas. LPFM stations must protect translators based on the minimum distance separations on first, and second adjacent, which is of course one of the issues, one of the differences between us and the translators. And if a translator moves in and causes a short spacing, like in this case, the LPFM can move further away but not closer to the translator. And that's the case here. If one of those 2 stations now wanted to even make a slight move in the direction of this translator, now they can't do it because of short spacing. That's one of the problems that's one of the issues. Now this is kind of the answer to your question, and that is what would happen if a translator was to interfere with an LPFM? Well, the rules have not been yet tested for LPFM, translator to LPFM. There is a challenge that's currently out there right now. There is a translator there's an LPFM in the Houston area that has filed an informal objection against a Dan Alpert, Cesar Guel controlled, translator, claiming that the translator is going to cause interference to the LPFM. But bottom line is, if the LPFM station is already on let me revise it. Right now in the full power rules, right now, if a full power station is on the air right now and a translator is proposed, and if the full power station can make a showing that within the proposed protected contour of the translator, that the full power station actually has bona fide listeners, meaning they're outside the protected contour of the of the full power station, but within this protected contour of this new proposed translator, the full power station can cry foul and say, yeah, we got bona fide listeners, and we have statements from those listeners that they listen from within that area, and that can stop a translator. Now, that would not really work in the case of Los Angeles there on that previous slide that I showed you, because neither of those two LPFM stations are licensed and on the air yet. They are still construction permits. They're unbuilt. They're still under construction. But what's happening right now in Texas is that Dan Alpert is making an argument. Now, this rule does not apply to LPFM stations. He's claiming that because the rule was written before LPFM, and that LPFM is not specifically called out in this rule, that it doesn't apply to LPFMs. And LPFMs cannot claim that same kind of protection. They cannot claim that they've got a listener within the protected contour of the proposed translator. And I disagree with that. And if anything, I wrote an open letter to the full commissioners, to William Lake, the chief of the media bureau, and the full commissioners, talking about various issues. And this is one of the issues that I brought up, was that we need to make sure that the media bureau is interpreting this 74-1203 rule to also protect LPFM, because it does say in there any broadcast station. It says in there, basically what the rule says is any broadcast station, including Class Ds, including FM translators, including TV Channel 6 stations, and Class D secondary stations. This was written before LPFM, and if LPFM was around by then, I'm pretty sure that it would have been in 1203. Did you have a question?
I just wanted to, if you could give that web address again for the FCC website where we can check to see if any of the AM stations in our area applied.
What is flagging, sir?
FCCdata.org, which is my site.
Okay.
That's the site you can go to and look, and
Right.
that's just my main broadcast query tool.
Thank you.
No problem. Now let's get on to the next issue. This is more of what's going on at the FCC, and more of why things are going to probably not go as fast as we want them to. But it's a good to know. Do we have anybody from any full power or below 92s in here?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is going to have we'll have to see kind of impact on below 92s. Because it could impact, it could lead to a bunch of new stations going on to Channel 6, which we really don't want.
If it's just me, we can talk about later.
Yeah.
What? Is it?
Okay, well, bottom line, what it is right now is the FCC is in the process right now of of taking the upper part of the UHF band, like from Channel 37 up to 51, and giving that over to broadband wireless services. They're paying TV stations to move to either the to move to any of the VHF channels between 2 and 6 or between 7 and 13, or go off the air completely. And right now, I think, what is it, up in New York? I think they're offering the New York stations like almost $1 billion to go off the air. And there's also supposedly some kind of a slush fund out there to help stations pay for their expenses to relocate to other parts of the spectrum. So it's a big mess.
These would be tax dollars?
I believe that the money that's being used to help the stations, I can't give you an authoritative answer on this, but I believe, okay.
All right, the way this works is that the auction, there are two auctions, okay? So that there's a seller's auction. Essentially, you're willing to relinquish or move your TV station. And that sets a price, and then there's a buyer's auction. And at the point where the prices meet, the auction closes, and there's an FCC target for how much. The money is split between the federal treasury and those who are selling. And then within that money that goes to the federal treasury raised in the auction will be a certain percentage that will go for relocation expenses. Because there are a lot of stations that are still, especially in more rural areas, that are still locally owned and so forth, for whom the investment in a home plan is really expensive. So to answer your question, yes, technically it's federal money, but the money doesn't come from a general disbursement from tax revenue. It's specifically money that was raised through the auction.
And that's in the billions?
It can be. I mean, it depends on how many people have to move, because that, until the thing is finished and you know what people are willing to buy, then that's how you know who has to move. Because what can happen for some of these stations is that even though they're perfectly willing to either move or go off the air for money, there may not be a buyer who has some spectrum plan for wireless services that wants that particular location.
Interesting. I've just heard about one of the stations up in South Bend that was had gone dark and was selling off, and then there's some rumor about one of the ones in Fort Wayne, and I was rather surprised to find out, I didn't even know how they could go off the air, let that happen, but now that I'm hearing that they're being compensated for that.
Well, some of it is if they've gone off the air, silent or dark, is what they call it for TV station. Thing is there's still, if they haven't been bought out by the end of the year, they still have the Communications Act provision to deal with, that if you're silent or dark for
Fallow.
more than a year, you automatically forfeit the license. So what you might find is somebody who's gone dark because they were having financial difficulties and is hoping to sell and then make it, they may have to actually go back on the air to start the clock ticking.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so we'll see what happens there.
Did you say UHF channels 37 and up?
It's going to be flexible. It's kind of it's going to be flexible. It's based on what kind of it's based on the market. I know at first they were talking about different markets. We're going to have a different upper limit because of being able to accommodate all the repacked stations, and it just also depends too on how many stations are willing to move and such. There's a whole science behind it, which is way beyond the scope of today. So, but there's a lot of information on that out there. Let's just go on to a couple things. This is just a quick. This slide just introduces into the next subject. But if you've ever wondered where the FCC came up with the numbers for how far you have to be from other stations. This is basically how they do it. You have a. Remember we talked about interfering contours before. The FCC has a standard distance for an LPFM interference contour, and then they also have standard distances for the protected contours for full power stations. So when you have, like, for example, a 67 kilometer minimum spacing requirement for between an LPFM and a Class A on the same channel, what they're looking at is they're looking at the standard distance of a Class A, which I think is 28.3 kilometers. Then what they do is they add on this 20 kilometer buffer zone, which if you look on the map is right here. So what they do is they're overprotecting the Class A, the full power stations. And the excuse that was given to us back in 2000 was, well, in case the full power station wanted to move slightly, it wouldn't affect the LPFM. And we have found out through 16 years of experience that is utter BS. So that's pretty much where they come up with that. So as long as the interfering contour of the LPFM station right now does not cross into the buffer zone of the Class A, of the full power station, that's where they come up with that minimum protection. And there is a provision in the Local Community Radio Act that specifically states that the FCC can't amend the rules to bring that in closer. Basically, if we wanted to abolish the buffer zone and say, okay, a Class A station can an LPFM can come up to 47 kilometers from a Class A, can't do it because of the provision in the Local Community Radio Act. So that brings us into the current proposal right now, and the current what we hope does not become the current pet project of Commissioner Agent Pye, and that is the Class C4. This is a new full power FM class for commercial stations. It's being proposed by an organization called SSR Communications. They are a small group owner of mainly rural Class A stations. What they're proposing is a maximum facility of 12 kilowatts at 100 meters above average terrain. Right now, Class A is 6 kilowatts at 100. This would be available. This would go between Class A and Class C3. It's only available in FM Zone 2, which is basically most of the U.S. except for most of California and the Northeast. And it's intended to be an upgrade for rural Class A stations that meet the minimum spacing. So pretty much what it's doing is it's just basically adding an additional 3 dB of service contour and just basically taking the station up about 3 dB. So how is this going to impact LPFM? Well, LPFM stations that are near upgrading Class A stations are going to receive an additional 3 dB of incoming interference. Simple as that. It's going to increase the noise floors of LPFM and translator stations. LPFM stations that are currently short-spaced to Class A stations could experience increased interference, and in some cases could cause interference to the new upgraded facility that might result in you having in displacement, meaning the LP station having to move. It may result in your LPFM station causing interference into the city grade contour of the station at the new higher power level, and that is grounds for displacement.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
By move, do you mean physically move or move to a different frequency?
Either. It could mean most likely be moving to a different frequency. So that's one of the possibilities there. And depending on how the FCC implements C4, it may require a larger minimum distance separation. As far as remember we talked about 67 kilometers between an LPFM and a Class A. It may result in a higher number. Now I've already made a local community radio act statement already, argument about that already, and one of the things I'm asking for if this C4 does get implemented is that the minimum distance separation between an LPFM and a C4 and an LPFM and a Class A be the same numbers for co-inversed adjacent. It can be done, but it's going to mean that that we're going to cross into that buffer zone. To me, that we can cross into that buffer zone. LP250, which we'll talk about in just a moment, crosses into that buffer zone. But here's a couple examples of what could happen. This is a state. These are from the comments that I filed in 2014 in regards to C4. This is an example of WYCJLP. I don't even know where this is at. What state this is in off the top of my head, but right now this station is currently just outside the interfering contour of a full power WHLC in wherever this is at. If that station was to upgrade to C4 at their current location, which they currently could right now if C4 was available tomorrow, the interfering contour would extend out, and now we have a new area that currently is not getting any predicted interference from this full power station. Now half of the station service contour and half of the LPFM service contour is now going to get interfered with under contours. Another example, Tucson. This is the downtown Tucson LPFM station, KTDT. Dealing with KOFH, which is in Nogales. This is again another situation where the Nogales station is their current facility is currently just slightly inside the their interfering contour is just slightly inside the service area of the LPFM. If that KOFH was able to upgrade to 12,000 watts up to the C4, the whole entire service contour of the LPFM station could receive could receive new interference.
Is that because they're on the same frequency?
Yes, that's a code. Those two examples were code channel situations. So that's pretty much what we have there. So I'm just saying is that it's out there. I currently have a relationship with SSR Communications. We are communicating back and forth, keeping in mind that they are also very supportive of the LP250 upgrade. So we're kind of trying to meet in the middle on some things. And I do think that there is a place for the C4. I think there is definitely some need for it, as long as it pretty much stays. As long as it stays out of the Zone 1 areas like the Northeast, out of California, I think that there is a place where everybody will be able to be accommodated there. And that's just one of the things that we're looking at. I did not see a lot of LPFM stations that would be impacted. And in a lot of these areas, if there is impact, there is also displacement availability. And that's one of those reasons when you can do a non-adjacent channel change and move to a different channel. So let's see, what went wrong in the 2013 window? Well, these were the mass filers. Over 10%, at least 10% of our applications that were filed in the 2013 window came from one of these folks, either Antonio Cesar Guel, who I'm currently fighting with, and his wonderful attorney, Dan Albert. The Catholic Church had over 100 applications in the previous window. Basically under the guise of a whole bunch of different little small Christian organizations, and all these stations do is rebroadcast the satellite Eternal Word television network. There's no local programming. It's a 24-hour satellite. Same with the Three Angels Broadcasting Network, 3ABN, and Seventh-day Adventist Church. They put in a whole bunch of stations. Another organization that you probably have never heard of is an organization called New Tang Dynasty. They were the ones that were behind some of these very interesting LPFM applications, like in New York City, the Global Center for quitting the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
Wow.
What?
They also had one in Los Angeles in MX-27 that they dropped out. And in the MX-27, they've got the infamous Emperor's Circle of Xinyun. They are a Chinese organization. It was coordinated by this guy named Booker Wade, who is the general manager of KMTP TV up in San Francisco. And he was behind all this. I had a chance to. I was working with him, and when we were trying to work out MX-27, and that kind of gave me the insight on what was going on nationally. But they've got stations. They've got several in the Bay Area, and they've got several stations across the country, mainly metro markets: Seattle, and the Bay Area, Houston, the one in New York, the quitting the Chinese Party, Communist Party one. If you see Chinese names in the signatures and you see a Q in the application in the call sign, chances are it's one of their stations. So what can we do? What's one of the things we're going to be working with over the next couple of years is what can we do to strengthen the requirements so for the next group of people that come in, because we want another LPFM window. And I want one in 2020. The reality is we probably won't get it till about 2023. Do we need to have more restrictive localism requirements? Do we need to have both the board and the headquarters be within 10 or 20 miles? What do we need to do? Do we need, another thing, and the other thing that I'm looking at is local programming requirements for young corporations. Any corporation that's like less than 3 years old that are being established just for putting up an LPFM station, should they be held to a higher standard? That's one of the things that we're looking at. That might prevent a lot of these on a whim, last minute Cesar Guel style applications where the corporation was filed like 3 days before the filing of the application.
And one funny story, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
It's a funny story. In my neighborhood in suburban Washington, Cesar Guel actually filed a corporate charter in Texas and misspelled the name of the city that was supposed to be, because it just happens to be Silver Springs singular, Maryland, and he put it in as Silver Springs because there's a famous place I think in Nevada called Silver Springs, and then registered it in Texas, but never filed as an out-of-state corporation in Maryland, so he actually couldn't even do business in Maryland.
And you know, the FCC ruled on that issue on the foreign corporation, and they say that's irrelevant. They say as long as the corporation is recognized in any state, that's all that's necessary. And that's where all these Delaware corporations, that's another thing that I want to crack down on in the next window is out-of-state corporations. My attitude is that the organization needs to be incorporated in the state that they're physically located in or any adjacent state within 20 miles. So that's pretty much what, you know, we're looking at that. That is something that I'm going to be working with Prometheus, what's left of Prometheus, with Common Frequency and some of the other major stakeholders at the high levels of LPFM to see if there's anything that we could do to possibly change the rules for the next window, to impact the next window, and possibly get a lot fewer of those silly applications through. That was just unnecessary garbage. It clouded the water, and in some ways it even resulted in some good LPFM applications dropping out. So
You remember the backstory, forgive me again, it's all right, the backstory on some of these organizations. I mean, we don't have hard evidence, but the structure is such that the FCC many years ago, because people used to play these games when there was still full power spectrum available, that somebody would file, never intending to actually operate a station, but basically to get settlement money from whoever would ultimately have to keep his pockets to buy off everybody else. So the FCC cracked down on it with certain rules that required you could only be reimbursed for your costs. So what happened is you have people who then maybe have some engineering background who then charge quite a lot of money, and they're actually behind the setting up of these organizations, because in the settlement then they put in, say a $10,000 engineering or bill or something, consulting bill, and then that's legitimate. And so if you do the arithmetic, if you file 200 and you get 10,000 apiece and you're successful half the time, that's not a bad payday. So.
Yeah, and in the case of Cesar Guel, we have found that there's a couple of different little hijinks going on. Bottom line is the question with those is who's the true party in interest, who's the benefactor. We've seen two different situations show up. We've seen one situation where multiple LPFM applications were being filed that were going to benefit a single organization and extend a ministry using multiple LPFM stations, kind of like a miniature of what the Catholic Church was doing. And we're also seeing a situation where ungranted applications were being sold to other parties, which is a huge no-no.
We were MX'd with one of these types of organizations, Message Radio.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was a totally different. Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with what happened in that situation.
But it was similar in the sense that the person behind it, applied for 2 or 3.
Yeah.
He was behind 2 or 3 LPFM applications, and you look at their mission statements, and they're all the exact same mission statements. And just on that, I was hoping the FCC would be like, but they were dismissed out of the Tucson market.
Yeah, there was definitely in the case of Message Radio, there was definitely solid evidence of a true party in interest, and that's what happened in that case. So the other 2 applications were considered inconsistent. Only one was granted.
Right.
And in that case, there was definitely a true party in interest. Let me talk about some good stuff here first. And half good, half bad. LP 250, which is basically the latest LP 250 proposal that I put into the FCC back in 2014, I think it was, or 15. That's my baby. Bottom line is that we're proposing to be able to allow LPFM stations, as many as possible. Right now, we're estimating about up to about 70% of LPFM stations that are currently out there would be able to upgrade to 250 watts at 30 meters height above average terrain. That number is variable because because you have to take into account second adjacent interference and stuff like that. Some of the stations may not be able to upgrade even though they're 73,807 spaced. But we've got a good formula out there that could cause, that could result in a lot of stations being able to upgrade their service. Main reason why we want, the main reason for the upgrade in this time around is to help you within your 3.5 mile zone. Right now we have a lot of LPFM stations that are experiencing issues with building penetration, being able to get inside of buildings, and this is the strategy that we're using this time instead of the rural outreach, which is also important. But in the last time around, LP 250, when it was proposed back in 2012 and actually went on the FCC docket, it was being touted at that time as just a way to extend out to rural areas. We're going to promote it a little differently this time, different strategy, and we're hoping that it works out. With that would be the ability to move up to 14 kilometers without a compelling argument. Right now you can move more than 5.6 kilometers, but you need a compelling reason to do it, and that is not policy, that is just case law. We're going to add some additional. We're going to ask for the second adjacent channel protections for FM translators, to require them to also protect LPFM stations on second adjacent channels. One of the other things I'm asking for is the ability for on-channel boosters.
What's that?
The ability to put a second very low-powered transmitter on the same channel to fill in an area that might be blocked by terrain but is still within your service contour. I currently have right now 2 test cases going in California right now. We're testing the current law, we're testing the current rules, and we're asking for waivers. I have 2 beautiful candidates for boosters in California where they're blocked by terrain, one in Simi Valley, California, one in Laguna Beach. And so those applications have been sitting in the hopper now for almost 2 years, and nothing's going on with them.
That might be applicable for here. Are any locals here?
And in Fayetteville.
Mm-hmm.
When you said terrain, are you just only talking mountains, or what if you have like tall trees and whole section of town with nothing but tall trees?
If you got like big spotty areas that are completely blocked out, there is a good chance that that a booster might help. The thing about a booster that you got to keep in mind is that the service contour, the protected contour of the booster, must stay entirely inside the protected contour of your main station, and that can be challenging. That can be challenging for some stations, and that will most likely involve the use of directional antennas, and that's how we're doing it right now in Los Angeles for those 2 stations that are currently in the hopper. RM 11749 complies with the Local Community Radio Act. It complies with all federal statutes. I mean, we're not proposing anything outlandish that right now, that anything that's in RM 11749, the FCC has jurisdiction to do. And of course, we're opposed by the NAB. We are supported by some of the state broadcasters associations, and we're also supported by the National Translator Association, who actually filed positive comments in 11749. Now, on the polar opposite end is RM 11753, which was the copycat rulemaking that came in a few days later by Dave Solomon. I don't know if any of you know him. Anybody who's been on the Facebook groups would definitely know who he is. But he runs a micro station. He runs what I call a micro station, LPFM, in Greenville, South Carolina. And he has been a major proponent for LPFM to have the ability to air commercials, full, outright commercial operation. Because he claims that it's hard for him to get content for his station because everybody wants to barter commercials. And that's his main reason for doing this. And of course, we all know that with the availability of programming through Pacifica and on the A-Infos and all the other various programming sources there are out there, that this is a bunch of horse hockey. There's plenty of good content out there. And we don't need, this is just something that we, what's going to happen if LPFM becomes commercial? What's going to happen is if you decide to go commercial, now you're going to be flipping the bill to the FCC every year with regulatory fees, filing fees anytime you want to make a change, filing fees for renewals. If you want to make a move down the road, you may be, you may have to compete with other stations in an auction. For new LPFMs, there would be auctions involved. Also too, because of the other regulations. I mean, right now, if the FCC wanted to, they could make LPFM commercial. There's no statute stopping it. That statute was repealed in 2000 it was in the Radio Broadcast Protection Act, but they repealed that piece. There is an opening for LPFM to go commercial. However, if they go commercial, what goes away? Ownership restrictions, because now we're into the Telecom Act of 1996. So we lose national ownership. We lose, we have multiple we can't do the one to a customer anymore. So that means Clear Channel can buy LPFM stations, EMF, Calvary Chapel of Twin Falls. All these organizations can buy LPFM stations if this happens. This is not what we want. And, we've gone, we actually joined forces with the NAB. This is one of the very few things that REC and the NAB has ever agreed on. And that is our opposition to.
Why is the NAB opposed to it? I understand.
Well, they don't want the new competition.
Yeah.
Also, another piece of 11753 is they want to do translator rules for technical rules for LPFM. Meaning, instead of doing the current curves that we have right now, they want to be able to allow LPFM stations to space just like translators do. Well, there is a problem with that, especially for a lot of the stations that are LPFM stations that are on foothill areas that are taking advantage of our current rule that allows them to have a nice huge area over a valley. And basically what would happen is that for a lot of LPFM stations that are in that kind of a situation, they would actually have to reduce power. You would lose audience if you were to go to translator rules because of the way that the FCC determines the maximum service area for a translator. They don't just look at the average, at your average height above average terrain and all overall. And they look at 12 different locations. They look at your height above average terrain in 12 different directions. And they take the one that, they take that one that's the highest. And for a non-directional station, that applies the whole way around.
I'm not familiar with the FCC process. How do these rules, what's the process with the FCC to entertain 11749 versus 11753? And how does that process work?
Well, here's the way it works very quickly. Anybody can propose a rule change to the FCC. You file a petition for rulemaking. It can be done electronically on the FCC system. If somebody at the FCC feels that it's worth moving forward and it's not frivolous, what they will do is they will assign a rulemaking number to it, RM11749 for example. They'll put it on a public notice, and then what that means is that for 30 days, that will be opened up for comments. Anybody can file public comments on that proposed rulemaking. And we already had our 30-day window. Now, of course, you can file comments at any time, and I encourage you to file comments on 11749. We need to keep the docket going. But there's an official 30-day comment filing period. Then what happens is down the road, if the FCC decides that they want to move forward with this, then what they will do is they will issue a notice of proposed rulemaking, otherwise known as an NPRM. You might hear that term used a lot by a lot of us policy folks. And then at that time, that opens up another 30-day window for filing comments, and then another 15-day window for filing reply comments. Usually, if it goes to NPRM, that means the FCC is seriously considering it now. That's where we want LP 250 to go next. So the commission needs to consider this a priority. They need to consider this as something important. And this is why we need help with moving forward 11749. We need to get elected officials involved. We need to put pressure on the 5 commissioners that this is just as important as C4, and we need to move this forward, and we need to move this forward at the same time with C4. If C4 moves forward, we want LP 250 to go with it.
So where do we make these? Yeah, I'll definitely just. Where do we go? What, like the FCC?
Well, the FCC has an electronic comments filing system. It's called ECFS. That's one place you can go. It'll ask you to enter the docket number. It's RM11749. And you can go there. But also, too, we also need some more grassroots support for this. Especially after November. Let's see what we have after November. I mean, I don't see anything happening with this year because of the election. But let's get it going for next year. Let's make this a 2017 to-do. Let's get elected officials involved. Light a fire under the commissioners. And
I was just going to say, if things go well in Indiana for the November elections, and Evan Bayh is going back for his Senate seat, I'll make a pledge that I'll go to his office, because he was very much in support of LPFM.
Yeah, and we're going to likely lose John McCain this time around, and he was actually, despite how many of us feel about the Republican Party, John McCain was a huge supporter of LPFM during the Local Community Radio Act. He was the bipartisan support that LPFM had back in 2010. Yep. Yeah.
And I'm going to pledge to do the same thing with the Arkansas senators, Tom Cotton, and whoever wins between Bozeman, Eldridge, and the other guys. So for all of us in Arkansas, find me in the LPFM group, send me your comments, and because I can pretty much get a one-on-one meeting with them. I've interviewed them before, so I'd love to sit down and bring the concerns of us Arkansas LPFMs to our senators.
Maybe this is something you and I can kind of coordinate afterwards in November. We could go. We could go to Capitol Hill together.
Well, definitely, we can go there. Or I was going to tell them if next time they come to Arkansas, we can meet them, anywhere in the state.
And just a quick plug before we go. This is the reason why I've been wanting to try to get a national organization on our side, an organization like the NFCB on our side, because this is exactly one of the ways that the NFCB could help us down the road is that they have the DC resources. And this is something, this is a priority for LPFM. Getting the service expanded is a priority for LPFM. And it's a priority for community radio. We need to improve our services. And right now, we need to get LPFM on a more equal playing field with the translators. And, we need to make stations more economically viable. This is the way to do it. And stay within the Local Community Radio Act. We're not asking for any changes in congressional, in the laws. We're not asking for Congress to pass any legislation to do this. This can be done under the current legislation. Although there are some of us that are looking at the potential of an LCRA 2. I've got some ideas in my head, but we'll leave it at that for right now. Something to think about for next year's GRC. Cliffhanger. All right, I think our time's about done here, so thank you very much. And I will be around all day today, tomorrow, and I will even be here for a bonus day on Tuesday. So if anybody needs to meet with me or get some one-on-one, some FaceTime, you have some issues you want to talk about, we'll do the best we can given our limited internet access here at the Springs.
So the NFCB should hire you.